All right, everybody, welcome on into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Eric Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know for tonight's four-game KBO slate. We do have the site back. Stats are still a little wonky, still working on that, but overall, we're looking pretty good. Comments are welcome. Hit us up. We want to answer your questions as well, as it should be a pretty quick show diving into some games. So let's get to it. First up, we got the game of the night, I'd say. Kiwoom Heroes against the Doosan Bears. Jake Brigham on the mound against Wanjun Choi. This should be a great one as the Heroes aren't going to be playing for a while. Heard some rumors that they might be going all out using Jokic in relief. How do we feel about Brigham and the Heroes winning one last time before the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of no reason not to. This is effectively a playoff game for them in many ways. If you look at the standings right now, the Heroes sit in fourth, a half a game behind the Wiz in third, and a game behind the Twins in second, and just a game up on these Bears. And again, every spot you advance in the playoffs comes with pretty big advantages. The 4 seed plays the 5 seed in a sort of best of 3, except that the 4 seed gets a 1-game advantage. And with the Heroes having only 2 games left, there's this one and then one more against, I believe, these same Bears a week from today. If they can make sure they finish above the Bears, which winning those 2 should all but guarantee, I would think, that gives them effectively 1 win in that 3-game series. So I think their last games of the normal scheduled regular season games were also against the Bears. So they're essentially in this giant series against the Bears. And really, they might as well treat it like a playoff game because it's worth at least 1 win in the first series, and potentially even if the Wiz and Twins stumble, it could be worth a whole bye if they can sneak up to third or second.
Yeah, it should be a big one tonight as they're facing off against the Bears, who have been impressive and still in a playoff spot. In terms of Brigham, who they'll have starting tonight, we'll see how long they have a leash for him, especially when you have Jokic most likely coming out of the bullpen. Brigham's been great, 13 innings pitched with just 1 earned run. Strikeout and walk ratio may be a little curious, though, over those last 2 starts, 11 against just 7 walks. You concerned maybe that he's facing Doosan for the second time? I had a great start last time, but in the KBO, when it's so small and you're seeing the same pitcher against the same team, often that doesn't normally lead to great results.
Yeah, that does add a bit of worry there, and he hasn't necessarily been in his best form. He had 2 pretty shaky starts before his last 2. He'd allowed 7 runs over 9 innings in his last start of September and his first start of October. And then, like you said, he didn't give up many runs, just 1 total in his last 2 starts, but the strikeout and walk numbers don't really suggest that he was necessarily dominant, although, of course, just 1 hit against the Eagles in 7 innings. I think you can look past a 5-3 strikeout to walk ratio when it's 7 scoreless innings with just a single hit. So again, it's not to say he's playing poorly, but not necessarily his best. Although really, if you look over an extended period, his last 12 starts, which basically goes from the time period a few starts after he finally got over his elbow issues. He was dealing with elbow issues for most of the early part of the season and then wasn't great right away. But in his last 12 starts, he has a 2.86 ERA and a 1.25 WHIP. And that's a near match for his numbers from last year, a 2.96 ERA and a 1.23 WHIP. So he's pitching like the guy the Heroes know he can be, which should be good enough to hold even a strong offense like the Bears to a low number. Although, again, not his absolute best form of late. So minor worries, I would say, but not super worried about him.
And checking in on the opposing pitcher, Wanjun Choi has been great for the Bears recently, been a great find for them this season. He's coming off kind of a mediocre stretch, though. He had a great start last time out, but we see there, 3, 4, that's maybe fine, but he's not going deep into games. Last time he went more than 5 innings was back on September 24th. Are you maybe worried that, he's not the great starter we thought, or at least I thought, maybe a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I think I've personally never had him much more than pretty good, which was a whole lot more than what the Bears were getting from the back half of the rotation. Again, he only entered the rotation in the middle of the season when Chris Flexen went down with a broken foot, but he's pitched well enough to stay there. But he's never been dominant, but he's been everything they need. He never really goes deep into games. In only one of those starts has he gone more than 6 innings. He has one 8-inning start way back in the start of September. So don't expect him to go too deep, but also he has never gotten blown up. He hasn't allowed more than 4 earned runs in any of his starts. So he's been solid. As a starter, he's actually been way better as a starter than a reliever this year. As a reliever for the first part of the season, he had an ERA of 5.59, so there really wasn't a reason to believe he'd step in and be this kind of guy who just shores up all the holes in their rotation. But as a starter, he's got an ERA of 3.22, so can't really complain about that. A 1.34 whip as a starter isn't quite as strong, I wouldn't say, as that 3.22 ERA, but it's a solid overall performance. I'd be a little bit more worried if he didn't have quite good start his last time out, though again, it was against these same heroes, so that does add a bit of risk there too. On the whole, he's definitely, I would say, a step below Jake Brigham, but he's a more than adequate starter, I would say.
All right, taking a look at this one in terms of the total set at 9.5 here. Where are you going to go? Bears 5.5 runs in the last 2 games on average. Well, the Heroes scored at just 2 back on the 17th. With 2 pretty strong pitchers, I would think you lean towards the under, but these offenses do have talent.
Yeah, definitely 2 strong pitchers. Wouldn't expect a lot of runs here, so I agree on the under. And I'm going to lean Heroes. I do think the Bears have a better lineup, and being heavily left-handed does help against Brigham, though if Jokic comes in and pitches close to half the game, that certainly helps. I think with the Heroes, again, just playing 1 game in an 11-day stretch here, I think that should help them a lot. Let him go all out. And I really do think Brigham is quite good. I mean, over the entire season, he's got a 23.1% strikeout rate, which is among the best in the league. I was looking earlier today comparing where that would stand compared to KBO average if you translated it into MLB terms. And it's the equivalent of a 31.1% strikeout rate in MLB, in the same realm as guys like Yu Darvish, Max Scherzer, Blake Snell. Obviously not saying that Brigham would suddenly be those guys if he moved to MLB, but if you compare his ability to put guys away, and that's over the whole season, even with his poor stretch early, I think those kind of numbers, I think, are just on another level from what Won Jun Choi is able to do. So I think that's enough to tilt the balance for me.
All right, going under 9.5 and leaning towards the Heroes. Barry liking it as well with the Joker behind him coming out of the pen if he does stumble in any trouble. Moving on, we got the NC Dinos and the Hanwha Eagles. A big old mismatch here. But you got Rosinski and you got at least some aces, or Eagles ace Sappold on the mound, or should be an ace. We'll see how he's been doing recently. Rosinski, mainly just a tune-up game, I imagine here. Six total earned runs in his last 25 innings over his last 4 starts. Strikeout to walk numbers, 19-10. Not horrible, but maybe you'd like to see him get those walk issues that plagued him way earlier in the beginning of the season under a little bit more control. You feeling all Dinos here just because it's Dinos Eagles?
Yeah, it's Dinos Eagles, and it's Raczynski Sappold. I'm afraid these Eagles might have a tougher time than my Philadelphia Eagles right now, who I am pretty happy to have an excuse to not be watching at the moment, based on how things are going. Not a lot in this one. It's 1 versus 10. The Dinos do still have something to play for at least one more day. Their magic number for clinching the top spot and the bye all the way into the Korean series is just 1. They don't need to get that 1 here by any means, so I don't necessarily think they'll need to push everybody to their absolute limits, but I think they'd be pretty happy to clinch and then rest for quite a few weeks. And Raczynski, I think, is just going to be too good for the worst offense in the league. Doesn't take much to be too good for the Eagles, but he's over that rough patch he had. He was shaky in late July through late August. He had 3 starts out of 5 with 5 or more earned runs, but he's totally past that now. In his last 9, it's a 2.54 ERA and a 1.15 WHIP, which is ace numbers. He's backed it up all year. 21.4% strikeout rate, the equivalent in MLB terms of 28.8% strikeout rate, which is what Jack Flaherty managed this year as a comp for where he stands compared to your average KBO pitcher. Clearly one of the best there, and he's pitching like it lately. I would not have many worries for him at all here.
Like Brzezinski, in terms of Sappold, pretty ugly season ERA. What, 4.86, nothing impressive. 11 hits in his last start. Gave up only 4 earned runs in 6 innings. But still, I can't imagine that the Dinos would struggle against him. And he hasn't been putting guys away in terms of strikeouts, just six or more only once since August 1st. Is this going to be a pretty easy over because of Sappold and because of this Dinos offense?
Well, Ruchinski's probably not going to give up many, which is going to be what makes that a little bit tougher. But yeah, not much from Sappold. He doesn't get blown out too often, and he had been in pretty good form lately. He'd allowed just 4 total earned runs across 4 starts heading into his last one, where he wasn't very good against a not very good Lions team. So he'd been in decent form, but even when he's on, decent is about all it gets. He strikes at just 13.4% of opposing batters. That's a full 4 ticks below league average, and over 3 ticks down from what he was last year. So it's even disappointing for him. I think he had a complete game 2-hit shutout, something like that, on the first on opening day, but it's been nowhere near that level since then. Just not a kind of pitcher who's going to scare anybody. And Dinos have too many good bats. So very, very comfortable Dinos win in this one.
Going with the Dinos, and like you said, 8.5 is low, but most likely will have to come all from that Dinos offense. Are you confident they can do that? Or do you think maybe Sappold gives you 5 decent innings and they hit that under?
I think 8.5 is too low. Yeah, I misread that. I thought it was the 10.5 from a couple games above. 8.5 is definitely too low there. That's priced as if Sappold is, what a foreign starter is supposed to be in the KBO, and he just hasn't been that. He's at best decent, and I don't think that's going to be good enough against the Dinos. So pretty easy over, I think.
All right, moving on. And speaking of actual aces, an actual foreign ace, Dan Straley, he's going tonight for the Lotte Giants against the Wyverns. I mean, Straley has been amazing his last couple of starts, 6 straight of 6 innings or more. He shut down the Dinos back on the 18th of just 1 earned run in 6 innings, 11 strikeouts too in his last start. He's had 6 or more in 6 straight. I think you said say Dan Straley, and that might be enough. Am I missing something here? What are we liking with the Giants Wyverns game?
Yeah, that covers just about 90% of it. The Giants did get officially eliminated last night with their loss, which would maybe make this a closer game if it wasn't Dan Straley. I think most of the Giants may not have much to play for. It's possible they rest a few hitters. But Straley's still pitching. He's auditioning to return stateside, I would assume. So he wants to close the season strong. No reason to believe he won't against one of the worst lineups in the league here. He had his rough patch too, just like Ruchinski. His was a little later, mid-August through mid-September. It was the same deal, 3 starts out of 5 where he allowed 5 earned runs or more. But he's just as much fully past it as Ruchinski was. 7 straight quality starts, an ERA of 180, a whip of 089 over that stretch, 49 strikeouts in 45 innings. Just no blemishes really on that record at all. 26% strikeout rate on the season against just a 6.5% walk rate. Both of those are excellent numbers. There's really, we were a bit worried about him during that poor stretch, and that's really been the only time to treat him as anything less than something like a top 3 starter in the league. And that's going to be well more than enough against the Wyverns here.
All right, we're liking Straley tonight. In terms of the opposing pitcher, Lee, he actually shut out Lotte in 6 innings the last time they met, but it's been a little while since that game back here, as you can see, back in September. 5 ERA over 5.5 on the season, 12 walks in his last 13 2/3 innings pitched. I can't imagine he'd do well against the Giants, but maybe if they do rest some of their bigger guys, they might have a chance. What are you feeling with Lee and his performance this season?
Yeah, and the Giants are heavily right-handed too, if you want to throw at least one more thing in his favor, but that's about it. He seems like a near lock to give up at least 4 earned runs. He's done that 9 of his last 14. He typically isn't going very deep into games either because he walks everybody. In his last 9 starts, it's 4 more walks than strikeouts, 33 walks against 29 strikeouts. And as you'd expect, he's giving up a ton of runs during that stretch, a 7.88 ERA in his last 9. So it's just ugly all around from him. Really, there were no expectations for him heading in the year, I wouldn't think, since he's a 25-year-old who pitched just 2 total innings prior to this season. 25 doesn't sound that young, but a lot of KBO pitchers, if they're legitimate prospects, are debuting as young as 18 or at least 20, 21, 22. So a 25-year-old with just 2 innings heading into this year, and he's more or less pitched like it. He's escaped with some low run totals every now and then, and it's possible he does it again here, but certainly wouldn't be what I would expect to see from him.
All right, we're looking at the Lotte Giants SK Wyverns game in case you're just tuning in. Giants big favorites here. In terms of offense, it's set at 8.5. A couple of notable guys. Asopson just went 1 for 5 yesterday, so maybe that's helping out Mel Rojas Jr. in the Triple Crown race. And Jamie Romack on the Wyverns, 3 for 4, 2 RBIs. Where was this guy for the Wyverns all season? I don't know what's going on here. Why he's just getting hot now.
Yeah, I mean, he's been decent at times. He's had some cold stretches. I believe he was battling kind of minor injuries throughout large parts of the season. But he's going to end up, he's got an OPS over 950. 32 homers is his second best total of his career. So coming on strong there, the Canadian slugger. I believe as someone who used to live in Canada, I'm obligated to call him the Canadian slugger every chance I get. So just throw that out there. Jung Choi right in front of him is quite a good hitter too. He's been on quite a hot streak with the homers. 3 homers in his last 5 games, 9 RBI. Would be excited about those 2 if it weren't Dan Straley. And I don't think those 2 are enough for me to think that this is going to hit the over, even though it's quite low. I think the Giants are going to have to do almost all the work on that one, given how dominant Straley's been and how weak the Wyverns are in general. So I'm going to go under, even though it's low. I think a 9-0 win for the Giants is more likely than a 5-4 for the Wyverns, given these 2 pitchers here. So I think that's the bigger threat. But I'm going to side under somewhat nervously just because it's so low. But, man, I'd be quite surprised if Straley gave up more than about 2 here.
Yeah, going with the Giants and the under 8.5 here as we welcome in some people tuning in late. Josh, thank you for joining us. And we got Double Up Sports. Welcome in. Yes, we like that Kiwoom Doosan game. Talked about that one a little earlier. Should be exciting with the Heroes pitching staff on full force tonight as they won't be playing for a while just because of the way the schedule worked out. Last game here, another ace. LG Twins, Casey Kelly is going for them tonight. Twins, I mean, I want to say they're legitimate contenders, but I just feel like they haven't been everything we really want to see. I mean, Casey Kelly has maybe been better than Straley recently, but, you know, it's Casey Kelly still. I don't know how much we really rely on his recent performance, especially when we saw what he did earlier this season.
I think I would rely on it. I think it's been long enough at this point. He was one of those guys pitched poorly early in the year, but for a few of the guys coming from overseas, you could tell that there was some, their spring routines were thrown off by the whole traveling back and forth during a pandemic thing. It's been quite a long run of very strong performance from Kelly at this point. 8 straight quality starts from him with an ERA of 1.53 and a whip of 0.85, and 16 quality starts in his last 18. So he's almost every time he's giving you at least a baseline quality spread, but usually a whole lot better. And his last 2, he's on another level entirely. 0 earned runs in 15 innings, just 4 hits, 13 strikeouts against just a single walk. I think you can make a strong case that based on recent performance, he's the best pitcher on the slate. Not that Straley's been at all shaky, but that's been an absolutely dominant run for Kelly. He was quite good last season too, so it's not like this is out of nowhere. He's also striking out more guys, though. He struck out just 16.9% last year. This year, it's jumped up by 2.5 points, up to 19.4%. A decent bit above league average, about 2 percentage points. So it's not new from him, and it's been going on for quite a while. So I don't really have much to worry about here with Kelly.
All right, you're believing in Kelly. I don't know, facing the Tigers, not a great offense, but still face them the last time out. Are you worried about that? Because we've seen sometimes when you face a team a couple times in a row that can hurt you. You're not really seem to be worried about that. That was Casey Kelly tonight, though.
Yeah, so I would count it as a knock against him, but that's just about the only one, and it's not a big one. I think he's just been too good for too long recently, and there's just not enough for this Tigers team, who I think is on the brink of elimination. I believe if they lose tonight, they're out, or if the Bears win. So they'll be playing for a lot for sure, but I just don't think they have enough bats beyond Preston Tucker and Hyung-Woo Choi to get much of anything accomplished against Kelly the way things have been going for him.
All right, opposing pitcher Kim, primarily been a relief pitcher. This year we have his starts highlighted with just 6 of them on the year. His max is about 5 innings. Last 3 of his last 5, he has more walks than strikeouts, which isn't a good sign. What do we think with Kim going against the LG Twins offense, which can be very powerful at times?
Yeah, this is, I think, just about as much of a mismatch in pitchers as the one we just talked about, Giants Wyverns, although there's quite a mismatch in lineups in this one, too, with the Twins bats being quite good, even without Roberto Ramos. Ki-Hoon Kim, just not really a starter, reliever for most of his appearances this year, and when he starts, he's only once reached 5 innings. Some of that's probably workload related, but some of it's just because why would you leave him in? He's got a 6.56 ERA as a starter, but things could be even worse if you look at his WHIP, which is 197. So nearly 2 base runners per inning, 12 strikeouts against 17 walks as a starter. Just nowhere close to effective. And there really wasn't any reason to believe he would be. He may be one day as he's just 20 years old. But in his rookie season last year, he had 65 walks against just 49 strikeouts, so 16 more walks than strikeouts. So just nothing on the track record here. Very much just a reliever pressed into duty as a starter and seems to be clearly in over his head.
All right, offensively, Kia, they scored 10 runs against Hanwha, but then 3 runs against NC a couple of games before that. LG, they scored 7 on Tuesday. And your guy, Kim, actually only 1 hit in his last 9 at-bats. The total for this one is set at 10.5 runs. I think that would all have to come from the Twins, which they could do, but 10.5 is pretty high.
Yeah, I think Casey Kelly might be dominant enough that I'm going to take the under here. It's a quite tight one because I really don't see anything from Ki-Hoon Kim. I think the difference in the total here between this one and the Dan Straley game, I'm really viewing those two as quite similar. The stronger lineup from the Twins compared to the Giants is why the over-under set a bit higher. So it's quite a tight one, but I will still just slide the under just because I don't think Kelly's going to give up more than 1 or 2. Even giving up 1 would be his worst start of his last 3. So I don't know if I would ever pick the Twins to score 10 even against Ki-Hoon Kim. So I'll somewhat hesitantly go under, and I'll slam the Twins.
All right, that's what we're looking at. Everyone not liking Kia tonight. It is quite lopsided overall with these aces. I'm not sure if that's because of the makeup games and the weird number of games on each day, but we do have some great pitchers against some pretty horrible offenses. You got to love the Twins. And yeah, that's what we're looking at. So we like to get the under 10.5 and the Twins here. We're the top 3 picks. I imagine that under 10.5 might be in consideration for number 1 just because it's Casey Kelly and he has been great recently.
Yeah, it's under consideration. I don't even think we need to go there, though. We've got 3 pretty massive pitching mismatches. Unfortunately, they're priced as if they are that. I'm not sure exactly what the order should be for these 3, but I'm going to go with Casey Kelly and the Twins as number 1. Just massive gap between Kelly and Ki-Hoon Kim. Pretty big gap in the lineups, too. Let's go Dinos over Eagles as number 2. I guess the gap isn't quite as massive between Drew Rucinski and Warwick Saupold because Kelly's been pitching out of his mind, whereas Rucinski's been pitching just merely good, and Saupold has shown things at times. But it's a huge gap in the lineups, too. And then number 3 will be Dan Straley. If the Giants had a stronger lineup, that could be number one because Straley's so good. But again, the gap between him and Gunwook Lee, just as massive as the other two. So we got three that should be pretty clear blowouts, and then one excellent game between the Heroes and Bears. Interesting slate, I guess you could say, given that just total opposites between those two and the rest.
Yeah, it should be a great one. We did talk about Kiwoom and Doosan earlier in the show. You can catch the replay on YouTube and Periscope. I like it. Going with the big favorites. It's hard to say that Lotte Giants and Dan Straley starting would be a number 3 pick, but when you get Casey Kelly and Drew Rosinski, the way they've been pitching recently, that seems pretty fitting in actuality. In terms of wrapping up here, Jamie has a question here. Ranking those run lines. Any thoughts, Eric, as we wrap up?
Yeah, that's a good question because the favorites are all pretty massive favorites there. I think maybe that Heroes Bears under might be the most interesting. Jake Brigham has been very good and potentially might have Eric Jokic backing him up in relief because the Heroes don't play again for another week. And Wanjun Choi is quite solid himself. 9.5 seems a little high there. Let's see. Which would be the second best? Maybe that Twins Tigers just because it's a bit higher. Although I am nervous about how shaky Ki-Hoon Kim is. And maybe I'm inclined to lean the Dinos as the third best one. That's quite a low over. Quite a low over under at 8.5 for a game that involves a Dinos lineup and Warwick Saupold. I think Ruchinski has maybe been slightly less dominant than Dan Straley and Casey Kelly. So maybe have that one slightly ahead. Because the Giants Wyverns one is quite tough. It's hard to pick under when it's a line that low. I'm leaning that way because Dan Straley's that good, and the Giants lineup isn't necessarily going to blow out even a bad pitcher here. So that one's maybe the shakiest of the four.
All right, that's all we got. Thank you guys for tuning in. Check out rotowire.com/freekbo. You have the lineups up and the pitcher stats. We're still working on that. But when we're all good to go, it is a great resource. So be sure to check that out. And as always, follow us on Twitter @RotoWireKBO. Thanks.
Thanks for coming, everybody.